That's what started the whole apocalypse.
We are the Templars, the high priests of death. We have been chosen to make others pay for the crime of being alive. We guarantee that all humanity, accomplices and heirs of the nuclear holocaust, will be wiped out once and for all. That the seed of man will be canceled forever from the face of the earth.
Hello everyone and welcome to another bad movie review. Today I'd like to talk to you about Warriors of the Wasteland. Straight out of 1983, this 90-minute romp of excitement and adventure is brought to us from Italy. Now, you're going to think this movie's dubbed, but I think it's actually in English and the vocal tracking is just off a little bit. But it's the grim darkness of the far future, and there is only war. No, wait, that's Warhammer 40,000. No, in the dark future, there is fear, desperation, and the evil Templars. Ooh. Here we meet Scorpion, our hero, a troubled loner and former Templar, who meets a young maiden who he saves from the sinister Templars. And then, of course, that sets things in motion for a big showdown. Now, I know you're thinking, this sounds stupid. Well, I'm not disagreeing with that. That's an accurate assessment. I mean, especially because there's bad guys named like Mako and Shadow and One. Yeah, he's got a number for a name. He's One steaming pile. Yeah, it's a Mad Max ripoff. Mostly, I would say Road Warrior ripoff. But this was way less anything. Take Road Warrior, knock its budget down, punch the writer in the head a few times, and maybe you'd get this plot. Way less plot. The acting is pretty terrible, except for Fred Williamson, who's always good. He's always at least solid. He's always plays kind of the same guy. So, I always like Fred Williamson. Whenever he's in a movie, I'll watch it. That pretty much wraps up the acting aspects, because everything else is pretty awful. A few things I did notice. In the dark future, where, there's been nuclear war and there's an apocalypse, the only things to survive were dirt bikes, dune buggies, golf carts, and one muscle car. That's it. That's all the vehicle transportation. And it's all armored up to look fancy. This movie had the budget of a 1970s Doctor Who episode. No, correction, Doctor Who had more of a budget. And it was probably all filmed in the same rock quarries. Except maybe in Italy. The explosions looked pretty cool, but it's kind of hard to screw those up. Action sequences were mostly by the numbers, people leaping on cue and sync with the explosions and general gunfire. Pretty uninspired, nothing original, no new camera angles or anything. Some of them just look silly, honestly, because they're chasing each other around. I mean, they're driving like these golf carts or dune buggies that are plated up to look like futuristic-y, I guess, and they just look kind of goofy. So the chase scenes just look, well, they look silly, let's face it. The pacing was pretty good, I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty solid, but it was so badly written, and the directing was, I'm sorry, I don't think the director did a very good job. I think it was phoned in. It just felt kind of like he was just like, yeah, okay, just do something and we'll film it. One take, we're done. Other things of note, apparently the apocalypse has lots of shoulder pads and beer kegs. Like, I don't know where these evil Templar guys are getting their uniforms, because they're pretty clean uniforms, and for a bunch of nihilists, that's a lot of work, a lot of in-depth work for people who want to wipe out humanity, is to color coordinate their goofy shoulder pads and outfits. So I wasn't understanding that, and where all these beer kegs were coming from was a little beyond me, but I'm sure they got a good deal on them in bulk. There was also some obviousness that the lead lady, obviousness, is that a word? Had access to hairspray, because her hair is very coiffed, very well done through the entire film, And for the apocalypse, you don't have hair like that. Unless it's the 80s and the apocalypse happens. Because that hair does not naturally occur that way. This does take place 9 years after the apocalypse, too. So I imagine all the hairspray would have been used up by then by some like glam rockers, but maybe not. I don't know. I'm not very familiar with Italy in the 80s. And why is Fred Williamson in Italy in the 80s? I'm not real sure. But this movie had a very Western feel to it, right down to like a actual gunfight in kind of like this civilized area, which was really weird and out of place. But the whole concept seemed to be a very spaghetti Western formula glued onto a sort of sci-fi apocalypse movie. A few things worth noting. There's one side boob shot. It probably would have been a whole boob, but the scene's kind of dark and the film quality isn't real good. So I think it was just a side boob. But, you know, it looked like it was probably a nice boob. I'm not sure. There's two people get drilled in the butt in this one. One literal, one figurative. Somebody actually gets a drill in their butt. I'm not going to ruin it for you because it's a surprise. You're going to have to watch it. And the other one is a very disturbing man-on-man rape scene. That it was very psychedelic and disturbing. And it took place in front of like all the Templars while they're watching their leader rape someone in the ass. And it was an unnecessary scene, not going to lie. And because it was so weirdly shot with psychedelic lights and all that, it wasn't very graphic. It wasn't, you know, we're seeing their pants down around their ankles. It was more implied. You saw him taking his cod piece off, and then they bent the dude over, and things happened from there. But it was sadly a memorable scene. It's not a scene I want to remember, because they're supposed to be highlighting like the action, but they seem to have put a lot of work into that scene. Probably because they didn't want to get too graphic with it and they wanted to do cutaways. But it ends up being like this, like in the movie Irresistible, with the rape scene in that, where that is impressed into your memory and burned in there, so the rest of the movie is almost forgettable by comparison, because you're like, holy crap, that went there. But overall, aside from that scene, I'm going to give this one a check it out. Because this has some quality cheese. An Italian post-apocalypse movie is a weird one. They didn't do a whole lot of these that I'm aware of. Most Italian films that I've seen are westerns or horror movies or porn, let's face it. And they generally do okay with spaghetti westerns. They're, you know, watchable sometimes. And there's some good ones out there, some of the Clint Eastwood ones especially. But the Italian horrors are a mixed bag. I'm sure I'll be reviewing some of those in the near future. But when I was watching this one today, I just kept thinking, man, they don't do apocalypse well. And it's a hard genre to do, because you kind of have to have a little bit of a budget and some burnout-looking buildings. This one didn't really have the apocalypse feel to it. Like, it looks like they're just goofing off in a rock quarry. And they even chase someone across what looks like a landing strip. And there's like greenery around. Like, this doesn't look like a nuclear holocaust sequence. So it just had a real kind of late 70s vibe. Instead of, you know, even though it's from 83, it had that weird, like, this is how discotheque people high on coke would have envisioned the apocalypse. And they made it for like way too little money. But overall, it's a great cheese film. It's got some pretty annoying dialogue. It's got Fred Williamson, who's always awesome. The lead guy wears this weird see-through plate thing at the end that's supposed to be like this armor, and it looks really dippy. The gun effects and sounds were silly. The acting was pretty cheesy. They did a good job with the makeup, though. Should point that out. And everything about this movie just said, like, B-movie you can make fun of. So it's fun in that respect. So I would give it a thumbs up for checking it out for all the goofiness and over-the-top action. But if you're looking for an actual fun post-apocalypse movie that has like a serious tone to it. This is not that movie. Go rent The Road Warrior or any of the other Mad Max films. Those are much better. This is more of a what are they thinking kind of movie. So check it out if you're into that. If you're looking for a serious apocalypse film, this is not it. There are better ones out there, but overall, I give it a recommended for cheese fans. I'm a big fan of the cheesy movies, obviously, and so check it out for that. Otherwise, check out some of my other videos and see what you think, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks again for listening.
How come they don't want anything?
They are people from a sect. They believe in something called God.
Don't move! He'll rip you to pieces, idiot! Let go of me!